Can a map be racist? The immediate answer is an almost resounding no. Maps are non-sentient entities that have no feelings at all. Yet, if you look at the map of the United States, you'll find a striking similarity between where black people live and who is the most impoverished, or even whose babies are more likely to be born underweight. I'll give you the data on these facts later, but this process can be called redlining, where minority communities in the 1930s were given less loans and resources depending on where they lived. This, as I will show, still affects modern-day citizens and thusly can play an important role in how America seeks to help those in poverty. I have combed over numerous journals in an attempt to lay out what these effects can look like and how serious the ramifications can be. Also, as a black man, I seek to try and educate on what structural racism can look like and have a vested interest in trying to help others reach equality. So let's give it an in-depth definition on what the practice of redlining was and how it can be used to plot even modern-day inequalities. But firstly, we have to build a base. Then defining redlining will prove to be an important base to build up our understanding. Let's talk about Liddell and Todd writing for the Journal of American History, where they define redlining thusly. A particularly notorious tool for promoting segregation has been redlining, the targeted denial of home mortgages and other financial supports according to presumed risk. Institutionalized by the Homeowners Loan Corporation, HOLC, and adopted by the Federal Housing Administration, the FHA, historical redlining defined the riskiness of investing in urban communities based on demographics, infrastructure, housing quality, neighborhood stability, and proximity to amenities or hazards such as manufacturing. The HOLC's assessment of urban neighborhoods in the 1930s was racially and ethnically discriminatory. It used the power of the federal government to formalize patterns of segregation and discrimination. To summarize, the HOC looked at poor black communities and decided not to invest in them because of the fact that they were seen as liabilities. It's important to point out that the people in the HOLC were most likely not racist and didn't seek to uphold racism, but the system itself saw investment into these poor communities as not worth it. I want to present a wide variety of opinions on what caused redlining. So let's next look at the book Race, Risk, and the Emergence of Federal Redlining, released in November 2020 by Fishback et al., where they present a different view on what redlining means. To quote, "Our results suggest the majority of black households were redlined because of decades of disadvantage and discrimination had already pushed them to the core of economically distressed neighborhoods prior to the government's direct involvement in mortgage markets. As a result, the HOLC maps are best viewed as providing clear evidence of how decades of unequal treatment effectively limited where black households lived in the 1930s, rather than reflecting racial bias in the construction of the maps themselves." Fishback suggests that redlining isn't inherently racist, but is reflective of how slavery and Jim Crow era laws pushed black people to live in poor areas. Either way, both of the authors would agree with the assessment that redlining is representative of structural inequalities to black people. But this all took place in the 1930s. Surely it wouldn't change how we live now, right? This leads to point 2, health concerns in redline communities. This leads me to the major impacts of what redlining does to communities, how it is linked with health concerns in these areas. From what I could tell, poverty rates inside redline communities are about the same with the national average, but where you can really tell the effects is from industries like health, who need investment to help out its population. Lynch et al. Wrote for Population Health in June 2021, where they reported neighborhoods with high sustained disinvestment had worse physical and mental health than neighborhoods with high investment. Our findings illustrate ongoing legacies of government-sponsored historic redlining. Structural racism, as manifested in historic and current forms of lending disinvestment, predicts poor health in Milwaukee's hyper-segregated neighborhoods. This data included 157 of Milwaukee's counties, but could be scrutinized because it only really talks about Milwaukee's plight. To bolster this point even more, though, Nardone, Chiang, and Coburn wrote in Environmental Justice during August 2020 about how historically redlined cities had higher rates of cancer, asthma, and poor mental health. Their study covered 9 cities and found that Atlanta, Cleveland, and Miami metropolitan areas were twice as likely to have poor health when compared to their normal counterparts. Pair these two studies together, we see that the redline communities have worse health overall. But that doesn't just stop at adults. It can even affect the womb. This leads to my subpoint B, birth complications from redlining. There's two journals I'm going to be using today that talks about how redlining is a factor for low birth rate, LWB, and small for gestational age, SGA. To quote Nardone et al. Writing for PLOS1, the prevalence of midterm birth, SGA, and mortality tended to be higher in worse HOLC grades, while the prevalence of low birth weight varied across grades. Overall odds mortality in preterm birth increased as HOLC grades worsened. Next, there's another study in New York where Krieger et al. Wrote for the American Journal of Public Health in July 2020 and found that preterm births were raised by 2.3% when looking at redline communities. Both of these studies indicate that being a part of a redline community can be a precipitating factor for whether or not you have enough resources to care for your child even in the womb. And I hope that both of these points, both and all of the journals that I've quoted today, can properly convey to you the underlying system of redlining and what it does to these communities. So let's summarize quickly. A map can't be racist, but it can show a racist past and how those scars continue to hurt us. We first touched on what redlining was, and then we talked about the consequences, where you see a decrease in the quality of health of both adults and babies that can be directly linked to the practice. To end, I want you to think of all the babies that are being born in those communities, whose lives have already been irrevocably scarred because of the fact that they were born in the wrong place at the wrong time. Using this knowledge, we can try to help those children. Thank you.